Hi everyone, welcome to another tutorial on my channel. In today's project, we want to build the login and the sign up interface for the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter. When you log on to twitter.com, this is what you see. We have this X icon here, we have the sign up interface here, we have these buttons here with some cool hover effects on all of them, and this text over here, all of them with their respective hover effects. And when we click on this sign in button, it brings us to the sign in page where we have these buttons here, the option to sign in with Google, with Apple, and even with email, and all these buttons here with some cool effects on them, some cool hover effect on each of them. So we have this over here, and you can exit this page by clicking this close icon over here. And you realize that whenever the sign in page is open, the background for the main interface is changed from white to something like gray. And when we exit this place, it gets back to normal. So this is for twitter.com, and in the end of the day, this is what we also want to build, something very similar. So you see we have also the X icon here, we have these buttons here with the cool hover effects on each of them, and when we click on this sign in button, it should also take us to this place with all this hover effect and all that we have already talked about on the main page. So this is working close to the original, and we can exit by clicking this and everything gets back to normal. And when it comes to mobile responsiveness, you'll see that on the main Twitter page, it's very mobile responsive. You can check. This is how it looks on a mobile device. So on something like tablets, this is how it's going to look. And it works very fine. And it looks very okay. So you can decrease it. And when it hits a certain width, everything rearranges. And when you look at what we are also building, the end of the day, we should have something very similar. You can see we also have this on a smaller screen. This is how it looks, and on something like tablets, this is what we are going to be having, just like the original one. So this is what we want to build in the end of the day, and we are building this using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in a step-by-step tutorials. In fact, the main work is going to be done by HTML and CSS with just some small JavaScript to hook up some functionalities. That's to open and close the sign-in button and those small functionalities. People, before we start this video, please take a moment to smash the like button for this video and subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this. Let's get started. On my desktop, I create this folder called X Project, and inside of it, we don't have anything. We have only one images folder with some images of the logos we'll be using, the Apple icon, the Google icon, the X icon, and also the close icon. So you can take a minute to download this, and let's open this with our Visual Studio Code. So over here, I have Visual Studio Code open, so I'll trace the directory of that folder, which is on the desktop. So desktop, X project, and I'll open. So now the first thing we want to do is to create a file. So create a file here. I'll call it index.html for the HTML file. I'll also create one for the CSS, style.css. So we have the images folder. So right now, I'll head over to the index.html page and create the basic HTML boilerplate. We'll just type exclamation and hit tab. So we want to change the document to what we're building. So we say X project. Yes, so we are building X project right here. So after this, let's link the style sheet to the HTML. So type link and style.css. So in the body, we want to write some code over here. So we are going to write the code for the page in the body. So in the body, we'll create a div and give it a class page wrapper. Now let's give the CSS styling for this page wrapper div. So first, let's select the entire document and remove all margin. Remove all paddings as well. Set box sizing to border box. And now we'll select the page wrapper and give it some width, 100%, and height 100%. Let's change this to viewport width. So now we can head over to the index.html and write this code with a VS Code Lifesaver extension, which I recommend you have. So now you see we have this fresh web page with nothing on it, so we can continue with the HTML. Now in this page wrapper div, we want to create another div and give it a class container. In this container div, we'll create another div and give it a class left right container. You'll get to know why we give it this class very soon. It's inside of this left-right container that will have these two sections. One for the left section and also the right section, where we have the logo, the X icon, and also the login interface over here. So inside this div, we want to create two sections. We'll create the first div and give it a class left container. Let's just put something over there. Let's say h1. Okay. And we'll create another and say right container. Say h2 right. So now we can run this with the live server extension again, or just save the code. You can see we have this over here. So our code is working up to this point. So now let's add the CSS styling. So let's start with the container div. We set width 100%, height 100%, display flex, align items to center, justify content to center. Now let's start the left-right container. We also set width to 100%, display flex, justify content, should be space around. We'll give it some gap, 5 rem. Now when we save this, you can see now we have this and the two sides are further apart. So now we can remove these things and fill it with something more meaningful. In the left side we have the image, and the right side we have all these things over here. So let's add this. So in the left container we can remove this and put the image. Images, you have the X icon there. You can say the alt should be X. And in the right side we need this H1 over here and also this text over here in H3. So make this an H1, and the text is happening now. And after that it's an H3, join today. And after this H3 we have these buttons over here, registration buttons. So let's create a div after this H3 and give it a class registration btn. So now in this reg btn we want to create these two buttons. The first one to sign up with Google, and the second one sign up with Apple. So we'll create a button with the class Google, and in this button we'll link one img, which is the Google icon. And after this, let's create one span, sign up with Google, and we can say the alt to Google, and we can copy this button and make some changes for the Apple login too. So we can change this to Apple and change the image file path too. So here /Apple, and the alt will also be Apple, and here we'll sign up with Apple instead of Google. And now when we save this, you can see we have this, but everything seems too large, the icons seem too large. So let's give the CSS styling for this. So now let's start with the left container. So select the left container, set display flex, align item center, justify content center. We'll give it some padding, 2 rem should be okay. Now let's style the image inside of this div, which is the X icon. So left container, img, set the width to 17 rem. So now we can style the right container. We give it some padding, 2 rem should be okay. Padding top should be 3 rem. So now let's start the H1 inside the right container. Right container, H1. We'll increase the font size. Send font family to this one. You set margin border, some 50 pixels. Letter spacing to 2 pixels. And now let's start the H3. So select the right container again and H3 this time around. As well, we change the font size. Now let's save this and see what we have so far. We have this, but you can see that the image is looking too big, so let's style them. So now let's style the rect btn inside the right container. Width to 50%. Now let's style the buttons inside of it. We set the width to 300 pixels, height to 40 pixels. We set some border, 1 pixel solid, this RGB color code. So now we have these stylings for it, and let's style the image inside the button. The rect btn, button img, we set width to 18 pixels, and we'll set display to inline block. And when we save the bunch of code we've written so far, you can see we have this. Let's give some margin to the icon from the text. So let's give it some margin right. So now it's looking very okay. So now let's design the section for or, the or over here. You can see that it's not just an or standing on its own. We have some line at the left and also some line at the right before the or at the center. So let's design this section. So after this button, we want to create another section and call it or section. And inside of this, we'll create 3 spans. And inside the second one, we'll put the text or. So let's give it a CSS styling. Over here, let's select this section, the or section, select the rect btn. It's a class. We'll give it width 300 pixels. Find item center. So now let's style the spans, the 3 spans we have. So I'll say or section span. We'll set the width to 130 pixels. 130. Background color, this RGB color code. It's a margin 5 pixels. And when we save this, oops, we have this. It's like we have more paragraph, we have more spans than we actually need. So in the HTML, let's change this one right here, the span to a paragraph. So a P. Also a P. So now we have what we are looking for. So everything is looking all right up to this point. So now let's add this blue button over here, the create account button, and also the policies over here. Let's add these ones. So after the closing or section div, we want to create a button with the class new account. And the text is create account. And after this, we'll create a paragraph with the class policies. So this is where we have the terms and conditions. So over here, I'll copy this text from here, and I'll paste it here. And continue from here, you will see that this is a hyperlink. So terms of service, we'll put that in a hyperlink so we can put an A tag, set the href to a hashtag, since it's not going anywhere. Then we paste that terms of service inside of it. And after this, we write end, space, then a hyperlink again, then set the href as usual to a hashtag because it's not going anywhere. And the text is privacy policy. And after this, with no space, we have a comma. Now space including space, a hyperlink again, as usual, href, cookie use. And when we save this, you can see now we have this over here. So let's add the CSS styling. So now let's select the policies div. It's in the reg btn. Color to this RGB color code. So now let's style the anchor tag inside the paragraph. We'll set text decoration none. Now you can see it's looking a little nice now. So we are basically left with this side. Already have an account and this button over here, and then the policies behind at the bottom over here too. So now in the HTML, after the closing reg btn, let's create another div and give it a class sign up. Now I'd like to make it this way. Yeah. And inside of it, we'll have an h4 with the text already have an account. And after this, we'll create a button with the class sign up btn. And the text is sign up. No, sign in, no sign up. It should be lowercase. I think I should remove this in over here. It should be sign in. So sign in. And also over here, we can change it to sign in. Or not sign I. So now let's add the CSS styling for this one. So we select the sign in div and it's inside the right container. So dot sign in, say margin top. And now let's start the h4 inside the sign in div. And after the h4 we have a button. So let's start the button. But you can see the button for this one is virtually the same as all other buttons. So we can copy the stylings for this one and make some changes, few changes to it, and that's it. Over here we'll copy and paste. And over here we want to increase the font width to 900. And we'll remove this display flex, align item center, justify content center from here. And we'll set the color to this RGB color code. Now you can see we have this pattern over here. So up until now we have everything at the right side and everything at the left side, but we do not have the hover effects when we take cursor over the buttons here. And also this one, when you look at the original page, whenever we hover over this, the links, you see they have this underlining. So we have to put this one too, as well as the colors, whenever the background colors, whenever we hover over them. So let's add the hover effect. So let's start with the sign up with the Google button, because that's the first one. You can see we have this hover effect. So after the reg btn img, we'll select the Google button. It's inside the reg btn, so dash Google. That's the class we give to it. And whenever we hover, so colon hover, whenever we hover over it, we want to change the background color to this RGB color code. And now when we save this and head over to the page, now you can see this hover effect, but it's kind of very sweet. So let's add some transition. The transition will work for all the buttons, so we'll just add it in all the buttons. We say, let's say 0.2 seconds. Ease in and out. So now when we save this, you can see it takes some small delay and it's very smooth in and out. So now let's add the hover effect for the sign up with Apple button. But you can see that the text by default is very large. It has a larger font width than the remaining one. So let's add that first. So over here, after the hover effect for this one, we'll select .apple and we'll give the styling, let's say font size should be, let's say 1 REM, which is the default, and increase the font width to 900. And now you can see that the text is kind of large. So let's add the hover effect now. So after this, you can select it again. Okay. Colon hover. And we change the background color to this RGB color code. So when we save, you can see that it's not working. Okay, so we remove this spacing from here. And now you can see it's working. When we hover over it, it's also working. So now let's create that for the create account button too. But you can see that by default, it has a blue background color and the text is also larger in size than normal. So let's add that first before we add the hover effect. So over here, we'll select it. So rec btn, and the class we gave to it was new account. So we'll set the font size to the default. Background color to this RGB color code. Then we'll remove the border. So now we have this nice looking button over here. So let's add the hover effect. So select it again. Colon hover. We set the background color to this RGB color code. And now you can see the hover effect. It has a lighter, a darker color, blue color whenever we hover over it. So let's add that for the hyperlinks inside the policies. So move to the policies. So select the policies again. To set text decoration to underline. And now this is working for it too. So we are getting somewhere. So we are left with the last one. So we are left with this one, which also has the same hover effect like the sign up with Google button. So over here we can locate it. So on hover, change the background color to this RGB color code. Then we'll save. And now you can see we have this hover effect for it too. So now we're basically done with this section. So what we are left with is the policies over here, these ones over here. So in the HTML, after the closing left right container div, we want to create another div and give it a class links. And it's inside this div that we'll have all these links over here. So the first one is about. And in the HTML, in this links div, we'll create an anchor tag and set the href to a hashtag because it's not going anywhere, and set the text to about. And so we have to do it for the remaining text, all this text over here. But I don't think I should be recording while writing this thing, so I'll pause and take it from there where I'm done. Yes, so this is it. I've inserted everything that I need to insert. The only thing that I think might be a problem is the copyright sign. If you don't know how to do it, on Mac is Option and G, and on Windows is Control Alt and C. So you hold down Control Alt and C on Windows, and on Mac hold down Option and G and the G key. So that's it. So let's start this in the CSS. So right here we'll select the links div, which is inside the container div. So set width 100%. Then we'll set padding 1 REM top and bottom, and 2 REM left and right. Now select the anchor tags inside the link div. So links, the links A. We set text decoration none. And now when we run this code, you see we have this problem over here. We see it align flex. That's because we set display flex in the container div. So what we'll do is that we'll set flex direction to columns. And now that problem should be solved. But it also has this hover effect. Whenever we hover over it, the underlining. We see the underlining. So let's add that. So we select links. We set text decoration. So now when we hover over it, you see the underlining. So that's basically it. And we are basically done with this section, except for the mobile responsivity. Oh my goodness, this is join. What kind of this thing is this one? Joining. So join. Sorry folks. And for the mobile responsiveness, we'll have to use CSS media query. So over here, after this one, let's leave some space. We'll type at media. Then we'll set the device width max width 950 pixels. That should be like a tablet. So any styling we put inside this media query will get executed whenever the screen size is reduced to something from 950 pixels and below. So we first want to take the page wrapper and set height to fit content. And we'll take the container div too. And also the height will be fit content. Initially we set the height to 100 viewport width, viewport height. But when we minimize the screen, the content size will be longer than that. So we have to make it fit dynamically. And after this, we want to take the left-right container. So now let's start the left container. So we see on a smaller screen, we'll remove all paddings for the left container, set display flex, align item center, and we'll leave some padding at the top. And we also have to reduce the size of the image, the icon. We give some margin to the bottom. So when we save this and we minimize the screen, once it hits that level, that the 950 pixels width, we see that the orientation changes. When we expand it again, it changes. So this is working exactly the way we want it to. So now let's start the right container too. Justify content should be left. And let's remove the align items here. It shouldn't be align items. We'll set flex direction to column. And now let's start the H1 inside the right container div. So right container H1. So reduce the font size. And give some margin at the top. So when we save this one, now when we reduce the screen size, you see that everything looks very well. But we want it to have different styling whenever it's reduced to a minimum width. It's very like on the smallest screen possible. So let's define another media query for that one. So after this media query, we'll set another media query again. So we say at media, say 500 pixels. We'll take the page wrapper div and set margin left to 10 pixels. Then after that, we'll take the left-right container. 30 pixels. Now we'll take the left container img, reduce the image size further, so we set the width to 2 pixels, 2 rem this time around. So now we'll take the right container, the h1 inside of it, so reduce the font size further to 2.3 rem. Now let's select the h3, so the right container, h3, we'll set the font size to 1.3 rem. And when we save this, and we come here and we minimize the screen, so that when it hits the 950 threshold, everything gets well. And when it gets back a little more, everything gets better again. So this is how it looks now. Over here, just as it is, you can see. So when we increase it, like in this mode, it looks very bad. And when we decrease it further, it looks better. So now after we finish building this with all the mobile responsiveness, all the hover effect and everything is working, what we want to do next is to build the sign-in page. So that when the user clicks on this sign-in button, it takes them to that page where they can sign in, like we have here, with this cool hover effect and everything, just like we built in the previous section. It has this hover effect and everything works just very nice. So our focus is to build this page over here, and this how it looks, ignoring what's on the background. The background, that's previously what we built, and this is what we want to build in this video. The focus for this section right now is to build this thing over here. So let's get to the HTML and start building. So for starters, we can just remove everything over here. We'll just assume nothing is here. You can comment this over here to the close of this container div over here. So now we can just make our space here for our project, and we can run this, and you see that we have currently nothing on the page. So we are starting everything just afresh. So now what we want to do is to create a div and give it a class registration page. So we can give the CSS styling for this. And also in the style sheet, we can just comment out everything. So now let's style the div with a class registration page. So dot, we set the width to 100%, 100 VH. And we'll give it a gray background color. So now I can run this with the VS Code Live Server extension again. And boom, we have this background color on the page. Now I want to mention real quick that I still have the images folder with the images that I displayed from the beginning, which we'll be using in the tutorial, these icons over here. So if you still haven't got it, take a minute to download this from the internet, and let's go. So from here, we want to create another div inside the registration page and give it a class form container. And in this div, we'll have one img, which is the close icon. I'll give it a class close icon. And after this, we'll link another image. So img again. And this is the X icon. So as usual, X icon. And the class will also be X icon. So now let's start this in the CSS. So now let's start the form container div. But before then, let's set the position for this, the registration page to position to absolute. And let's make the top 0. So now we can start the form container, which is inside the registration page. We set the width to 600 pixels, height to 90%. So now let's start the images inside the form container. We'll start with the close icon. Set the width to 35 pixels. We give it same height. So we set position absolute, top to 15 pixels, left to 15 pixels, and set cursor to pointer. So now let's start the X icon. So inside the form container still. And now when we save this, you can see we have the form container over here, but we want it to be aligned in the center. So what we'll do is that before the margin top, we'll set margin auto, and that will take it to the center. And that's exactly what we have here. But look at the close icon. The close icon we have here should be somewhere here, but it's inside is positioned absolute to the parent div rather than the form container. And that is because over here we set position absolute for the close icon, but the parent is not having any positioning. So the position over here in the form container will be inherit. So we'll set it to relative position. So position, then it will be positioned relative to the parent. So now we have it here. And this is exactly what we want. But here it seems the close icon is way too large. So let's reduce it from 35 to 30 pixels. And this should look okay now. Okay. Now here in the HTML, after these images, we'll create a form. The action is not required, so we'll just set a hashtag, I think here. And inside this form, we'll create an H1, and the text is sign in to X. And after this H1, we'll create a button and give it a class sign up Google. And inside this button, we'll first link an img, the Google icon. And after the img, we'll create a span, and the text is sign in with Google. So we can copy this button, the entirety of the button, and paste again and make some changes. So instead of Google, we change it to Apple. Apple, and this one, the image will be the Apple icon, and the odds should be Apple. And the text over here, instead of Google, it should be Apple. So let's give the CSS styling. So now we'll start with the form inside the form container. Now let's start the H1 inside the form. We'll only give it some margin. And now let's start the buttons. We'll set display flex. So this is the styling for the button. So the background color is transparent. We set cursor to pointer so that when we hover over it, it will indicate that it's clickable. So now let's start the image inside the button, the icons. The form is inside the form container div, and we have the button inside the form and images inside the button. So width, give them 20 pixels and some margin to the right, 10 pixels. So now when we save this, you can see we have this here, and when we hover over the buttons, we have this hand-like cursor indicating that it's clickable. So it's working the way we want it to. So now let's create this section where we have the or. If you look at it, you can see that we have one thin line over here, another thin line to the right, and the text is at the center of it. So let's add that in the HTML. So after the button, we'll create another div and give it a class alternative section. And inside, we'll create one span. And after that, with no text, we'll create a paragraph with the text or. And after this, we'll create another span with no text. So in the CSS, we'll select the alternative section. We'll set the width to 100%. So now let's style the span inside the alternative section div. We'll set width to 45%. This RGB color code. And when we save this code, you can see we have this over here and it's looking okay. So now we are left with this input field and these two buttons and also this text over here. After the alternative section closing div, we want to create an input with type text. Let's call it, the name should be personal. Let's give it an ID, personal as well. And let's give it a placeholder, this text over here. And after this, we have these two buttons. So let's create them. So after this, we'll create a button with the class next. Let's make it next btn. And the text is next. And we'll create another button with the class forget pass btn. And the text is forget password. It's a question. So now let's create this text over here. Already have account. So over here, after the closing form tag, we'll create a div and give it a class sign up. Inside this div, we'll create a span. And the text is don't have account with a space, an a tag, an anchor tag, and set the href to hashtag. And the text is sign up. There's a space between. Now you see we have this input here and the buttons. The buttons seem to have inherited the CSS styling for the previous ones and this one here. So let's add their unique stylings for them. So let's start with the input inside the form. Width is 100%. So this is the CSS for the input. You can see it's looking nice now. So we are left with just this one. So the class we give that div was sign up. So it's inside the form container. Set margin top 25 pixels. Margin left to 25%. Now let's start the span inside the sign up. So now we can style the anchor tag inside. Font size will be 18 pixels. Text decoration will be none. And we'll give it some color. This RGB color code. Now when we save, you can see everything looks very good now. But we want to now add the hover effect for all the items over here. So let's start from where we just ended. This one, this sign up over here. You see that when we hover over it, it has the underlining. The text decoration comes. So we'll select this again. Paste it here. Colon hover. Text decoration should be underlined. Now you can see it's working. So now let's go to the sign in with Google button so that we can start from the top. So over here, after the images in the button, before the alternative section, we want to select the various buttons and give them the hover effect. You can see for the Google, we have this class for it. Sign up Google. So let's select that over here. Colon hover. We change the background color to this RGB color code. And now when we save this, you can see when we hover over it, we have the hover effect. But for the sign in with Apple, you'll see that we have the hover effect for it, but we also have the text is a little bit deep and a very bit larger than the usual one. So let's add that first. So over here, we'll select the sign up apple. I will set the font size 17 pixels. Font width will be 600. And now you can see the font width is increased. So now we can add the hover effect. So we'll select it again. Colon hover. We'll set the background color to this RGB color code. Remove this over here, this space over here. Now when we save and we head over, you can see that the background color is changing. We have these two of them working. So now let's add the stylings for the next button. You can see it has a background color that is black, and also the text is white, and some slight hover effect. You hardly will notice it. And it comes right after the input. So after the input, we'll select the next btn, and it's inside the form container. So we'll give it the background color that is black. And when we save this, no, we have to spell the next variable. So now you can see we have the styling for it over here. So let's add the hover effect. So select the next btn again. So when we hover, we'll take the background color. The background color will make it this RGB color code, which is technically black, but with some level of opacity, transparency rather. So when we save this, you can see now we have this slight change in the color whenever we hover over it. So now we are left with the forget password, which technically has the same color change as the sign in with Google. So we'll just apply this same styling to it. So after the next button, what we want to do is we want to select that button, which is forget pass btn. That was this thing we gave to it. Colon hover. And we can copy this one, sign up apple, and just put it here, because it's technically the same thing. And when we save this one, you could see we have the same thing over here. But one thing I forgot to mention is that if you look at the original thing, you'll see that this one also has a bolder font rather than just the normal one. So we'll select this one again without the hover. It's forgot, but I think I misspelled it. But since it's working, we don't have to worry. Set the font weight should be 900, and font size should be 17 pixels. When we save, you can see that we have this over here. The hover effect is working for all of them, but it's quite too swift. So in the buttons, over here in the buttons, we'll set transition so that it works for all the buttons. Transition or 0.2 seconds, and it should ease in out. And when we save, you can see this now. It takes some small delay, but we are left with one, which is the close icon. When you look at the original thing, when we hover over it, we have this background color change for it. Set the background color to this RGB color code, and we want some delay, so we'll set transition inside the close icon. So when we save, so now when we hover over the close icon, you can see the background color for it keeps changing. It changes. So the hover effect for all the buttons is working too, and that for this text is also working. So folks, now we've been able to build this, and we also have this so far. So now our job is to be able to click this sign in button, so that when we click it, we should be able to open this page over here, the sign in page. So over here, you see that when we click this, it opens the sign in page, and the background for this the other page turns to something else, a gray color, something like that. And once we click this close icon, we should be able to exit this, and the background color for this changes back to white. So that's what we have to do now. And with that, we have to hook some small JavaScript, and it's a very simple JavaScript to actually make this work. So here in the code, we can uncomment all these ones. So after removing all the comments and running everything, we have this over here, but we can't see what's at the background. This is because we've given some background color to the registration page. Yeah, so we set the background color to gray, and when we remove it and save, you can see we have this now. Now you can see that we see everything. But the background color for the main page is white, and that for the registration is also white. So things are a little bit overlapping. What we want to do is that whenever we load the page, we don't want to see this one, the registration page by default. We should only see it whenever we click that sign in button. So to start with the JavaScript, we first have to create a JavaScript file. So we'll create a script.js file. And in the HTML, index.html, we'll link there. So before the closing body tag, we'll type script and set the src to the script.js file. And now we can test to see if it's working. So in the JS file, we'll make an alert statement. Alert. Hello. Let's run this again with the VS Code Live server extension. And see we have this here, hello. So it means the JavaScript is actually connected to the HTML. So first, let's set the display for the registration page to be none. So over here in the CSS, we say display to none. And now we don't see the registration page again. So whenever we click on this sign in button, we want it to be displayed. So now what we want to do is, in the HTML, we want to select the main page, the page wrapper, and also the sign, this button over here, and also the registration page, and even this container over here. So if that sounds confusing, don't worry. When we go over it, you'll understand what I mean. So let's start with the page wrapper div, which contains everything on the page. So say const the query selector, and it's a class. So we'll pass the class with a dot page wrapper. So now let's also select the sign up btn. Sign up btn should be equal to document of query selector sign up btn. And after this, we'll also select the close icon. And lastly, we'll select the registration page. So now we've selected all that we need. So what we want to do is to set event listener on this button, which is the reg button. So the reg button, we'll set an event listener on it, and it's a click event, so that whenever somebody clicks on it, something happens. Here I make a mistake. It should be a sign up, but still doesn't matter. So we'll say sign up btn.add event listener. It's a click event in quote. And after that, we want to call a function, and we'll use an arrow function. And after the click, we should be mindful of the comma. So what we want to do whenever we click on this sign up btn is to take the registration page and set the display to block. We set the display to none in the CSS. So we'll say reg page.style should be equal to block. When we save this and head over to the page, when we click this, nothing happens. It means something is wrong with this. I just realized that in the HTML, instead of sign up, I made this sign I. So I think that should solve the problem. So when we head over here again and we click this sign in, it should display this one. And this is exactly what we want. But when you look, you see that whenever this registration page is on, the background color for the main page tends to something like gray. So we should add that also. So we'll take the page wrapper, dot style, dot background color, and take note of the camel case notation. It should be equal to this RGB color code. And when we save this and head over to the page and we click this, you see that the background color for this also changes. So our code is working the way we expect it to. But right now, if you look, you can see that we can't exit this by clicking the close icon. So we have to be able to click this place. When we click the close icon, it should be off, and the background color for the main page should also change back to white. And that's what we want to do next. So just like we did for the button, we'll do same we'll set event listener on the close icon too. So close icon or add event listener, and we say click event. And after we click with the comma, we'll create an arrow function. And this should be arrow. And what we can do from here is we'll copy this code over here, these two lines of code, and make some changes to it over here. So we paste it inside this function. And instead of making the display block, we'll make it none. So when we click the close icon, the display should be none. We want it to go off. And the background color for this one should change back to white, because that's what it was from the original, from the beginning. So we change back to white. And I assume this should work whenever we save and head back to the page. So in the page right now, when we click this one, it comes on, the registration page comes on, and the background color for the main page changes. And when we click on this one, it goes off and the background color changes back to white. So this is working the exact way we intended to. So folks, this is basically how we've come to the conclusion of this video. How we've been able to build the sign up and the login interfaces for the social media platform X, which is very mobile responsive, through a step-by-step HTML and CSS tutorials with some small JavaScript to add some small functionalities. If you find any value in this video so far, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this one. If you have any questions, please do leave it in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.